Hello, everybody. What is going on? I've got work here pretty soon. I've got to leave for work in about 40 minutes, but I figured before I went that I'd cover some news stories for you guys. A little bit of news in this motherfucker, just because I've been reading some articles today and I found quite a few things that are interesting. So, instead of one of my usual informative videos or critique videos, today we're going to talk about current events. Yes, we are going to talk about current events. What's up, guys? I'm sorry about the glare, by the way. See that? There's a glare right there. That glare is from the sun. Well, not really the sun, just outside. So I'm going to try to have my head here as much as possible so you guys don't see that. What's going on, guys? What's going on? Let's see what we got here. Traveler says Paul Cockshot socialism is unfalsifiable. Therefore we should dismiss and completely revive the USSR. How about you try having an IQ above room temperature, because that's not the arguments that I'm posing when I say people are in favor of an unfalsifiable model of socialism. What I'm specifically talking about is people who say that all existing socialism, like literally every project on record, like you, is not true socialism, and they're in favor of a model, that's just utopian, because in their mind it's just supposed to work. It's supposed to, just work, and that real socialism has never been tried. That's specifically the trend and tendency that I am talking about. The trend that many ultra leftists fall guilty to and fall prey to. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. What I'm here to talk about here today is the eviction crisis. All right. So I'm here to share an article with you guys. Forgive me, I have a sore throat. Here we go. Biden to allow eviction moratoriums to expire Sunday. Housing is the cure. City Life Ada. Let's see. The Biden administration announced Thursday it will allow a nationwide ban on evictions to expire Saturday. Arguing that its hands are tied after the Supreme Court signaled the moratorium would only be extended till the end of the month. The White House said President Joe Biden would have liked to extend the federal eviction moratorium due to the spread of highly contagious Delta variants of the coronavirus. Instead, Biden called on Congress to extend the eviction moratorium to protect such vulnerable renters and their families without delay. The moratorium was put in place last September by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Quote, given the recent spread of the Delta variants, including among those Americans most likely to face evictions and lack vaccinations, President Biden would have strongly supported a decision by the CDC to further extend this eviction moratorium to protect renters at this moment of heightened vulnerability, unquote, the White House said in a statement. Quote, unfortunately, the Supreme Court has made clear that this option is no longer available. The court mustered a bare 5-4 majority on last month. Okay, so it's the Supreme Court that's fucking us. Awesome. To allow the eviction ban to continue through the end of July. One of those in the majority, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, made clear he would block any additional extensions unless there was a, quote, clear and specific congressional authorization. By the end of March, 6.4 million American households were behind on their rent. As of July 5th, roughly 3.6 million people in the U.S. said they faced eviction in the next 2 months. Okay, so let's say that happens, right? Let's say Biden doesn't renew the eviction moratorium. You want to know what the long-term consequences of this is? The long-term consequence is that the states are going to pick up where the federal government left off, and they are going to continue the moratoriums on a state-by-state basis. And let me tell you exactly why this is going to happen. Because if they let 3.5 million people, 6.5 million people go out on the streets during a pandemic, this country is going to fall apart. You are going to see BLM protests, or you're going to see protests that make the BLM protests look like a LARP. You're going to see, remember those massive crowds of thousands of protesters that took to the street, guys? Those massive crowds that, it took the cops with riot gear. Like, if the police, were quitting the force in record numbers, and they were leaving the force in record numbers over the BLM protests, oh, they're going to get completely overwhelmed by the evictions protests, because if you have millions of people out there on the streets, I'm telling you right now, spontaneous revolutionary consciousness will emerge immediately on the spot. Immediately on the spot, guys. So, in the end, what needs to be done about this is, if you guys are in an attendance union or you're involved in a attendance union, I recommend that you get involved in a attendance union, because it is very important that we make sure that in the coming months, because those moratoriums, the moratorium extension is going to expire, it's important that in the coming months we make sure that nobody goes out on the streets, that we make sure that, you know, people that we occupy our apartments with don't suffer. I just recently got in contact and got involved with the Cincinnati Socialists, and they're in the process of forming a tenants union as well. So I'm going to be doing some good work with them, hopefully in the coming months. So get in contact with your tenants unions, form some tenants unions. This is absolutely essential work that needs to be done. And if we have millions of people on the streets, that is going to cause a lot of civil unrest. Like that, I mean, I remember seeing estimations like last year that as many as 30 million people could be out on the streets. They ain't going to let that many people go out on the streets. I'm telling you why that many people are not about to be homeless within the next few months. One, because you and I are going to be in tenants unions involved, making sure those people don't get kicked out. And two, like I said, the states are going to pick up where the federal government left off, right? Because over the course of the pandemic and the economic crash last year, it was mostly the states. Yeah, it was basically mostly the states that were picking up the slack from the federal government. So, I mean, really, on a state-by-state basis, it's been the governors and their individual municipalities that have been the ones against landlords, or, damn it, I'm reading comments, against the pandemic and the crisis overall. So that's really all that's going to happen, is the states are going to once again pick up the tab where the federal government left off. Because like I said, powers that be know it's the same reason why we're not going to lose Social Security. It's the same reason why they're not going to take away what few state government programs that we have. Because if they did away with Medicaid or Medicare, like let's say they did away with Social Security, that alone would cause this country to fall apart. What are you going to do? Just let millions of elderly people go on the streets? Millions of elderly people get sick and die? Because that's exactly what's going to happen if you take away Social Security. And for those exact same reasons, they, as well as us, we're going to make sure nobody goes out on the streets. So that's basically all I have to say on the looming evictions crisis. So on the end of July, the moratoriums go away. The moratoriums go away. The moratoriums disappear. Am I jinxing it? Really? Am I really jinxing it? I don't think so. I think that this is exactly what's going to happen, and it's going to turn into a massive nothing burger. All right? Because it's going to have to be a nothing burger. Because if it becomes a something burger, we won't have a goddamn country anymore. But anyways, I don't really have much else to say on that topic. I just wanted to comment on that. Let's talk about Jacobin, or as Black Red Guard likes to call, Crackabin. We have to act now to stop the U.S. eviction crisis. Let's see what Crackabin's commentary is. The flood of evictions is about to slam the United States, but it doesn't have to be this way. The federal government can stave off the crisis and fix the underlying injustices, unless they do like outright rents forgiveness. Because so many people were out of work, and we still have millions of people that are behind on their rent. They're just going to have to keep extending the moratoriums indefinitely until everyone's either able to get it paid off to where an acceptable number of people can get evicted, say a few 100,000. That way the number of homeless in America only doubles rather than octuples or increases by orders of magnitude. But anyways, the U.S. Census Bureau biweekly household pulse survey on July 15th revealed that nearly 4.2 million people nationwide report that it is likely or somewhat likely that they will be evicted or foreclosed upon in the next 2 months. 4.2 million people. That's why I'm saying this isn't going to happen. Well, I mean, what are you going to do? Let all those people out on the streets? I mean, I'm not. It's very likely not going to happen, just because I think the powers that be see like the threat that poses. And I mean, a general strike is coming here in October. The general strike is coming. I mean, really, this is something the mainstream news hasn't been reporting on. But the reason why we're even getting concessions like a higher minimum wage and why like we're having these moratoriums, because the powers that be know, they know that if they don't grant like just enough concessions to keep people from rebelling, then people are going to fucking rebel and we won't have a country anymore. Excuse me, I've got a cough. In the short term, the Biden administration should extend the CDC. If the CDC does not reconsider its indication that it would not extend past July, states and local governments. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, local governments are just going to extend it if the federal government doesn't. You know, Jacobin's going to do their housing as a human right plug, yada, yada. I don't want to talk about this. Do we got any comments here? Yeah, they have to grant concessions. They literally don't have a choice. If they don't grant concessions, then it's going to lead to like the emergence of spontaneous class consciousness. And I mean, as possible as it is for them to co-opt it, if it grows too big and out of control, they might not be able to. And we might end up with another socialist movement on hands. I mean, slowly but surely, socialism as an ideology is becoming more popular. There's a growing number of socialists in the United States. I'm just saying. There's no such thing as free housing. I mean, I know, obviously not. I mean, I know it's not free. No one's saying it's free. We're saying that it shouldn't be a commodity, obviously. So, anyways, let's go ahead and move on. Moving on. Biden's free housing puts us all in ICE camps. God forbid. God forbid. It seems like there's going to be a Red Scare too with China. I mean, yeah, they're trying to push it. The problem is that China's not actually socialist, and our economy is so like fornicated with and intertwined with theirs. Like, I don't really see us separating with China anytime soon or going to war because of how interdependent our economies are. I mean, it's going to take a fucking catastrophe for something like that to happen. Anyways, little commentary. I found this interesting clip in my Discord, but Evo Morales asked if China and Russia are imperialist. Speaking of China, so let's see what Evo Morales has to say on the topic.
China, Rusia también es imperio. Yo diría que es un país desarrollado.
Hold on, sorry guys. I would say that they're developed countries that are a power. All right, let's see what he's got here.
¿Qué hace imperio? Comparto con el compañero. Imperio invade. El imperio instala bases militares. Y el imperio chantajea su desarrollo de un país. Como Estados Unidos. ¿Por qué si Estados Unidos es imperio? Usa al Fondo Monetario Internacional y dice, si quiere crédito, alguna ayuda, primero tienes que privatizar tus recursos naturales. ¿Para qué? Para saquear.
I'm going to play that again for those of you who have a hard time reading. Here.
Imperio invade. El imperio instala bases militares. Y el imperio chantajea su desarrollo de un país. Como Estados Unidos. ¿Por qué si Estados Unidos...
My man.
usa al Fondo
My
Monetario
man.
Internacional y dice, si quiere crédito, alguna ayuda, primero tienes que privatizar tus recursos naturales.
If you want a loan, you got to... Yeah, why? So they can loot. Dude, he's got it all figured out. Why? So they can loot. When did Evo Morales become so fucking based? I mean, I knew he was a pretty cool guy, but Jesus, like, we're reaching levels of based right now that shouldn't even be possible. I haven't seen any military bases at China or Russia anywhere in Latin America.
Visto una base militar de China, de Rusia en toda América Latina. No hay. Sí, Rusia en algunos países está enfrentando las bases militares de Estados Unidos para sacarlo. Esa es la pelea a pedido de esos países. Esa es la profunda diferencia. ¿Qué es imperio? ¿Qué es una potencia? ¿Qué puede ser potencia? Mira, compañeros, si nosotros cumplimos con nuestra meta de...
If we fulfill our goal in industrializing lithium, Elon Musk will cry himself into a fetal position every night for the remainder of his days. He will wake up in a cold sweat every night, knowing that he can't just rape and pillage and plunder Bolivia for their fucking lithium mines anymore. You guys remember that comment by Elon Musk? We'll coup whoever we want. He just straight up feels entitled to another country's natural resources because he's rich. I don't understand what it is with this worship of Elon Musk like he's some sort of god. I mean, didn't he just get rich off PayPal and he had like wealthy, well-off parents that were able to finance his initial investments? Like, that's what I'm talking about, man. The people that make it within this system were people that were either relatively well-off or well-off in the first place. The families and individuals that are wealthy today are the same families and individuals that have been wealthy for like the last 500 years, you know? I always think to like Donald Trump, you know, Donald Trump, his little small loan of $1 million in the 1980s. Like, dude, bro, even if that's true, do you guys have any idea how much money $1 million was in the 1980s? Let me just look this up real quick. Hold on. Inflation calculator. Here we go. Let's see if 1980, 2021, $1,000 million. So then, yeah, that's basically like $3.3 million. So, bro, if you gave me that kind of money, I'll tell you what I wouldn't fucking do. I wouldn't fucking go broke. Jesus. That's what I'm saying. Like, these people were never poor. I mean, the only people that really rise through the ranks and become millionaires and billionaires in this system are people that hit the market at the right place at the right time with the right ideas. I mean, can you say that they got lucky? Sure. But did they fucking earn it? No. It's like saying that I bought a lottery ticket and when I won the lottery and made $1 million, that, hey, I earned that money. I didn't earn it. I got lucky. I got lucky and I won the lottery. You know, the hubris and delusion of rich people that just think that it's a privilege to kiss their asses all the time, nonstop. Total narcissism, dude. Total fucking narcissism.
Industrializar el litio, porque tenemos un plan a 2028-2030. 40 fábricas de litio. Bolivia, con tema litio, va a ser una potencia mundial. Es una potencia en ese rubro. Eso no es esperanza, eso es tarea. ¿No? Entonces, una cosa es la potencia desarrollada, otra cosa es imperio.
An empire is what which invades countries.
¿No? Repito nuevamente.
I repeat again, I've never seen Russia or China or India, which is also a power, with those military bases.
Rusia, de China, algún país, India, y también es una potencia.
I mean, it's true, though. Like, fucking these countries that we accuse of being autocratic and totalitarian, these countries that, you know, we accuse of being guilty of this, and that, all the shit that we talk about the Eastern countries. And then, yeah, guys, do you guys remember when China dropped an entire country on top of another country and drove out all of the indigenous people and forced them all into tiny little ghettos and carved up pieces of land while expropriating all of their natural land and resources? Does anyone remember the ongoing process of settler colonialism that like China is going through with, where they slowly but surely, as the decades pass by, systematically exterminate and forcibly remove entire like ethnic identities and indigenous identities from the country or, you know, the planet? Does anyone remember when China had like a quarter of the countries of the planet's prison population Or anyone remember when China literally invaded countries over oil and bombed countries to smithereens over oil? No, that's right. China's not guilty of any of these things. They're not guilty of beating up, harassing, jailing, and shooting dead fucking racial and ethnic minorities in the streets and terrorizing crowds of peaceful protesters. China's not guilty of any of that shit, When you look at the way they treated the Hong Kong protesters, which were straight up a psyop, straight up a psyop. When you look at the way that they treated the Hong Kong protesters versus the way that America treated the BLM protesters, we've got 24 dead protesters by police, 24, 25 BLM protesters that died across these protests and over the course of 4 months. And then how many people died during the Hong Kong protests? 2, and they were both suicides, So Evo Morales is 100% right here. The Russians and the Chinese, I mean, there's a case to be made that they're imperialistic in the Leninist definition of the term, but the Leninist definition of the term is rather dated. We really need a more up-to-date term for imperialism, because imperialism as we know it has been on the backswing for decades. I mean, the only real great empire or colonial empire left is the United States, and it's basically a proxy empire on behalf of the European Union, the Western colonial countries as well. They gave up all their big ass militaries and empires because America's basically the proxy that secures those trade relations and economic dominance on their behalf, And NATO was originally created as an anti-communist organization. It was straight up created to basically circumvent and fight against the Soviets after World War II. Look at who were the original inhabitants of Taiwan. Too few died. Trump loves China. Yes, he does. Is that why he's funding right-wing populist parties across Europe? Yeah, are you talking about Putin? Honestly, Putin is a total political careerist and an opportunist. He's an anti-communist, and as a socialist, you should not stand Putin. You should not stand Vladimir Putin at all. He is not our friend. The Communist Party of the Russian Federation is straight up controlled opposition. They're basically a red social democratic party. Otherwise, I'm not a fan of Putin. I'm not a big fan of Xi. I just recognize and I acknowledge that they aren't they're clearly not, I mean, they're rival imperialist powers, or they're rival superpowers, They're rival superpowers, but they're not progressive forces in the world. I think China is somewhat progressive because of their Belt and Road Initiative, but the main reason why they're building it is so that they have a trade route and a resource loop built so that when the war breaks out between America and China over water resources by the late 21st century, that China will have economic advantage and logistical advantage. I know I'm saying that invasion or outright war, anything you hear about conflicts between US and China right now is pure spectacle. But once we start running out of clean drinking water, that's when you need to be concerned. That is when the wars are going to come. Once we start to run out of clean water, and that's when you're going to start to see the wars, all right? The actual resource wars. I'm just saying there's a reason why Nestle's in the process of privatizing all our water. There's a reason why Bill Gates just became the #1 landowner in all of the United States, buying hundreds of thousands of acres of land, The Putin and Xi are the only forces keeping U.S. dollar hegemony. Yeah, basically, yeah. They're just counterbalances of the United States. I mean, I can hardly say I have critical support for them. I mean, I don't really I see the totality of the system as a problem, and it's, the IOTUS is on us as well as the proletariat in Russia and China to establish actual socialism. Could China make the switch? Maybe. Could Russia make the switch? Yes, but it would actually require another Russian revolution. China is not doing what they're doing out of the goodness of their heart. China is trying to secure its own interests. All of the infrastructure they're building are the property of private Chinese firms. They are doing, not even the Soviet Union, for much as I lauded the Soviets for their foreign policy, were doing what they were doing out of the goodness of their hearts. They were trying to secure their own, domestic state interests as well. Every state tries to do it. And I think what China's doing is a little bit more nefarious than what Dengists lead on. But I do acknowledge that, they are a much more polite. They treat the third world much more kindly, but that's just because they don't need to be brutal to the third world. They don't need to. They know, because of the history of the Western countries and how badly America and the NATO bloc have brutalized the third world historically, that all they have to do is offer them a better deal. That's all they got to do. They just got to offer them a better deal. They don't need to go in there and build bases and bomb people. They can just trade with you and just take advantage of you through their loans. Anyways, let's move on. So, what's going on? U.S. leaves Afghanistan just to get back to bombing it. U.S. intensifies airstrikes in Afghanistan as Taliban offensive nears Kandahar. About a dozen strikes are aimed at slowing a Taliban surge, aiding a beleaguered Afghan military. Man, it's a good thing that America went in and did that. They've got women's rights to protect. We were leaving, the damn Talibanese were surging. We just need to stay in Afghanistan indefinitely, guys. We just need to stay there indefinitely, because if we leave, it will literally be like the sequel to the Holocaust. It will literally be a Cambodian genocide on steroids and human growth hormone and methamphetamine, all right? That's the reason why we need to stay in Afghanistan indefinitely, all right? So, shoot, I just had a brain fart. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. Let's go ahead and read this article. The U.S. has stepped up airstrikes in southern Afghanistan amid growing apprehension over a Taliban offensive threatening Kandahar, the country's second largest city and spiritual capital of the Taliban movement. The fall of Kandahar would deal a heavy blow to the U.S.-backed government in Kabul, which is trying to impart calm to its citizens as the Taliban has seized swaths of the countryside. The airstrikes, about a dozen in recent days, points to a continuing role for the U.S. military in Afghanistan, despite confidence expressed by President Biden and the Pentagon that the Afghan armed forces are well equipped and ready to fight the Taliban on their own. U.S. forces are due to depart in Afghanistan by the end of August. Kandahar, a population of 600,000, home to the deceased Taliban leader Mullah Omar, and host to key military bases once maintained by the U.S., is also a major economic prize. The Taliban advanced a dozen miles towards Kandahar city in recent weeks, squeezing it from 3 decades, capturing swaths of territory in Panjwai and Angradab valleys, places where foreign troops fought for decades to keep the Taliban at bay. From the west, Taliban fighters are now within 2 miles of a base once used by the Central Intelligence Agency to train Afghan special forces, who now occupy the facility, according to residents. Let's see. Jen McKenzie told reporters that the meeting that the U.S. had increased the number of airstrikes against Taliban in the last few days and was prepared to continue if the Taliban offensive continues. Okay, so we're basically never going to leave. How delightful. Let's watch this video.
Essentially completed their withdrawal from Afghanistan, and there are real worries about their survival of the Afghan government in their absence.
Let's go ahead.
Taliban forces opposed to the Afghan government now control more than 200 of 400. U.S. and allied military forces have essentially completed their withdrawal from Afghanistan, and there are real worries about the survival of the Afghan government in their absence. Taliban forces opposed to the Afghan government now control more than 200 of 419 districts in the country, U.S. officials say. They've also isolated 17 provincial capitals, and they effectively control 4 of 7 international border crossings. So against that grim backdrop, what's the best hope the U.S. has to keep the current friendly Afghan government in power and prevent an absolute Taliban takeover?
Indefinite occupation. That's the answer. But I'm sorry.
Well, any optimistic scenario starts simply enough with the Afghan army hanging together. That is really the main goal of any strategy going forward. The army has shrunk some recently through various kinds of attrition, and officials say it's down to 200 to 250,000 forces from a peak of 350,000 earlier. The fear has always been that in the absence of American help and in the face of a Taliban onslaught, much of the army will simply melt away. The key is to prevent that from happening.
So the puppet government we set up isn't even fucking stable enough to hold its ground. Like, oh my God, that's ridiculous. We set up, okay, so what happened was Afghanistan had a socialist revolution, and then the Soviets came in to help secure it. They were invited in to help secure it, and then America just went all in to backing the Mujahideen, and then the Soviets repeatedly beat back the Mujahideen. USSR is dissolved. The Afghan government that's established ends up basically getting toppled by the Mujahideen, the remnants of which go on to form the Taliban. And now Afghanistan has just been a fucking clusterfuck for decades, and we straight up armed and sponsored the terrorist groups that would go on to become the Taliban. Like, the Taliban are a creation of the United States. Like, this is Frankenstein's monster coming home to roost. And now we're basically never going to be able to leave. That's exactly what this is. Because you can't, I mean, the Soviets were stuck fighting these guerrilla rebels for literal years, and they end up just coming back over and over and over again. Like, and eventually that's what's happening to the U.S. military. The U.S. military, after a certain point, our troops are just like, fuck it, what's the point? You know, fuck it, what's the point? Why are we even fucking here? Like, this is an unwinnable war. We are sitting here fighting an unwinnable war, which is why we just need to pull out and let them figure out their own shit. In the long term, the country will be better off for it anyways, because it's our involvement that's keeping it unstable in the first place. Like, seriously. Fucking ridiculous, dude. I mean, the original Afghan group in the 80s splintered into different groups. One of them was the Taliban. Yeah, no, but still, we made it possible. We made the rise of the Taliban possible through our actions. So, like, okay, so we're basically never going to leave. That's pretty much all it's going to be. Because the Taliban is just going to keep surging and gaining ground until, you know, and we're just forced to endlessly occupy and indefinitely occupy. And this is how we get fucks. This is how we get these fucks. We're going to try to argue that we should stay. Like, seriously. Like, how are you going to sit here and claim to be anti-imperialist and literally argue for the occupation of a foreign country? Like, fucking ridiculous. My lord. This shit's frustrating the hell out of me. But moving on, got some other stories for you guys. Let's do this. Or they can work for the U.S. What, you mean employ the Taliban? Just give them a government job. I think that's a good idea. Yeah, let's do it. Let's hire the Taliban. I mean, the only reason we're even in there is because of the poppy fields. That's really it. It's so Big Pharma can get the chemical base for their painkillers. I mean, if there's one thing the Taliban does demonstrate, it's that protracted people's war does work. In a sense, it does kind of work. Yeah, they're doing the same thing in the Philippines. Yeah, but the Filipino communists, I mean, it's basically they're just spinning their wheels. It's just like an indefinite, never-ending war. It's like what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Chinese military would be perfectly within their right to protect the sovereignty of their neighbors by kicking the U.S. out. Yeah, but is China really going to wage World War III over Afghanistan? I don't know. Rare earths, rare earth minerals, facilitate resource transfer. I don't know. Let's go ahead and do this. Oh, yeah. So the U.S. sanctioned Cuba again. Did you guys hear about that? U.S. sanctions Cuba over protest crackdown. Man, this isn't fair. This isn't fair. Our freedom fighters that are trying to topple your government and destroy your regime. How dare you? How dare you stop our counter-revolutionary color revolution? Like, how dare you stop us? We're gonna more sanctions. More sanctions. Sorry. How do you like that? It's like it's like dousing someone in tar for whatever reason, and then you douse them in more tar for punishment. This is sort of like, I don't know, like, how much worse that they can get. How much more can you even sanction Cuba? They basically are barred from global trade. So, like, what do the sanctions entail? The Biden administration imposed new sanctions against a top Cuban military official and a special police unit on Thursday, and warned of more sanctions ahead, accusing the government of its agents of violence, repression, and human rights violations against peaceful protesters. The Treasury Department blacklisted Defense Minister Alvaro Lopez Miera and an Interior Military Special Police Unit actions imposed under sanctions power targeting gross human rights abusers and corruption. This is just the beginning. The United States will continue to sanction individuals responsible. Oh, so they're sanctioning individuals. About to say, how do you sanction Cuba more than it's already been sanctioned? That doesn't even make any fucking sense. So who's this bitch? Is she a glowy? Let's check out her Twitter. Acting Assistant Secretary for the U.S. State Department of Western Hemisphere Affairs. Why does she look so uncanny? Like, that face is so uncanny to me. It's a good thing I'm not on any LSD right now. Otherwise, this face would really fuck with me. But anyways. White House spokesman Jen Psaki said the U.S. sanctions are part of a broader effort that include humanitarian assistance and building international condemnation. Yeah, that's right. You're protesting the harsh conditions of our sanctions. We're going to punish you with more sanctions. Exactly. That's what I'm talking about, bro. What? You're gonna crack down on our color revolution, our CIA-backed color revolution? I don't think so. Here's some more sanctions. The Cuban police has arrested some 500 demonstrators and activists who were among thousands pouring into the streets on July 11th to protesting deteriorating living conditions and lack of freedoms and scarcity of basic goods. And services, including COVID-19 vaccines, all manufactured problems on behalf of the United States government. The government responded to the protests by cutting internet and phone services and deploying so-called rapid reaction brigades, police and Communist Party military to take back control of cities and towns. Thursday's action, which bans travel and freezes any assets within U.S. jurisdiction, is intended as more of a message of censure than one expected by itself to course changes in Havana's behavior, a person familiar with the manner said. But the administration is working with other governments, including other allies, to build an international coalition that might be able to exert greater economic pressure against Cuba's communist government. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap things up here in a minute, but for now, I really don't know how you sanction Cuba any more than it has been sanctioned. I legit do not know how you do that. But America's figuring out how to do it. We're figuring out how to strangle this country even more. And let me tell you guys a little story. You guys want to hear a little funny story? I want to talk about a little bit of hypocrisy, but then again, pointing out hypocrisy on behalf of the United States for the brutal, fucked up shit this country does. You know, back to that tar example. It's like if I were covered head to toe in tar and I'm pointing at the person across the room that has like a tiny little tar stain on their t-shirt and saying, "You're covered in tar." That's basically what America does whenever we're like, "Oh, You did a human rights catastrophe, human rights violation. You jailed protesters. Oh, as if America's never jailed peaceful protesters before, or never jailed protesters before. I remember last year, I actually partook in a protest. There were about 5,000 people. It was a Black Lives Matter protest, right? So this Black Lives Matter protest, the city had set up a curfew because of the repeated protesting and rioting that was going on. Well, they set the curfew for about 8 o'clock, and these peaceful protesters locked arms in front of the courthouse. And basically, what happened is the police would proceed to go in, and they would do a mass arrest of hundreds of people. I'm talking some 300 people were illegally and unconstitutionally detained and forced to spend 15 hours in the police officer's parking lot. These people had like little zip ties put around their wrists. They were forced to stay there for like 14, 15 hours. There was this one girl who was having a health panic. She was having her health breakdown because she couldn't get her insulin. None of these people could use the bathroom or get any food or water. They had their phones stripped from them. They were just detained for 14 hours. No phone, no food or drink, no bathroom, no connection with the outside world. And they were all just crammed like a bunch of little cattle inside the police parking lot and basically guarded by like armed officers. Yeah, America, this happened within American soil. All right. It's a verified story. I know some comrades that actually were part of the group that was detained. So in this country is going to sit here and in the face of the Cuban government detaining protesters like when this routinely went on in America, the dozens of people that were just straight up executed over the course of the George Floyd it's just the hypocrisy of empire, man. That's all it is. It's just the hypocrisy of the empire. I mean, there's not much else to say about it. All it is just a way to concern troll, to try and bully and browbeat other countries. You know, this one country that stands in defiance to global capitalist hegemony and basically fuck with it so that we can try and oppress them and try and force them to liberalize, force them to give up their natural resources and basically cuck the country. That's what we're trying to do, trying to cuck the country. But Cuba is not going to cuck to bourgeois interests. So anyways, I think that's all I have to say for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. I've got to go to work, so peace out.